In the last section, we finished up the first half of our first time deployment checklist. We created our Heroku account, we committed our code base to a Git repository, and then we installed the Heroku CLI. So at this point in time, you should be able to flip over to your terminal and run the command Heroku-v and see some version information pop out. Again, if you're seeing an error message, let me help you fix this. Okay, so now that we've got the Heroku CLI, we can use it to create a new app. Now let's first use it to create the app, and we'll talk about exactly what this app thing is. So at the command line, we're first going to log into our instance of Heroku by running Heroku login, like so. After you run that command, you should be prompted to enter your Heroku credentials. And so this is the email and password that you just created your Heroku account with. I've already signed in to my local Heroku CLI, so I'm not going to go through that process. But if this is your first time using Heroku, you definitely will want to. Next, we will use the command line to create our new app. So we'll run the command Heroku create, like so. Now after just a second or two, we're going to see some output that contains two separate links. The first link that we see on here is the first link is the address that we'll navigate to whenever we want to visit our application inside the browser. And so inside of here, you'll see some randomly generated name for our application. In my case, I have Agile Bayou 65260. You very likely will have some completely different string. This string right here identifies the name of your application to Heroku. The second link is the link that we really care about in our case. This second link right here is our deployment target. It is a Git repository that we can push our local server to. So we already committed our code base in the last section, right? We installed Git, we created a new Git repository, and we committed our entire code base to that repository. We are now going to push that repository to this remote repository that is managed by Heroku. The instant we push our repository to this remote one, Heroku will take that as a signal that it needs to deploy our application and start it up automatically. So we're now going to move on to the second to last step where we deploy our app with Git. First, we're going to make sure that we set up a remote Git repository using this second link right here. So I'm going to copy the entire link, and then I'll press Command C to copy the link. Then at my command line, I will execute git remote add Heroku, and then I'll paste the link. This command right here says add a remote repository to our current repository, to the one that we just created inside the server directory. We want to name that remote link or that remote repository as Heroku, and this is the address of that remote repository. So I'll run this command, and you might see something that says remote Heroku already exists. If you do, that's totally fine. Otherwise, you might not see any output at all if the command successfully ran. Okay, so now we can use this to actually deploy our application. We're going to run the command git push Heroku master. So this says take all the code that we have committed to our local repository and push the master branch to the Heroku repository, which exists at this URL over here. So we'll run this command, and then the instant we do, we should see a little bit of debug information pop up. And so all this remote stuff, this remote message that you see right here, is all feedback that is provided by Heroku directly. And so Heroku is going to attempt to build our application. It's going to automatically detect that we are making use of Node.js. It's going to set a couple of different runtime flags. It's then going to install the versions of Node and NPM that we specified inside the package.json file. It will then install all of our dependencies, which are listed inside the package.json file. And then it's going to essentially finish up the deployment. And so hopefully you're going to see a message that says something like build succeeded. Now at the very end, we should see something that says like verifying deployment done, and then the final success message that says the repository was successfully pushed to this remote location. Okay, now I'm going to say right now that at this point, hopefully everything works and the application should be working. However, it's incredibly likely and very possible that you might have some small issue. So the first thing we're going to do is test out our application and see if it's working. When we test this out, if it doesn't work, that's totally fine. Do not panic. Keep watching this video and I'll show you exactly how you can debug what's going on and try to figure out a solution, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is test out our application and see whether or not it is working successfully. So at the command line, we'll run the command Heroku open, like so. Now when we run this command, it will automatically launch a new browser window and navigate to our deployed project. So for me, it automatically visits my remote deployment target of Agile Bayou, and I see the message "Hi there" appear on the screen, which is currently what we are sending back to anyone who makes a request to the root route of our Express application. And so if you see this right here, or if you see just like plain text that says "Hi there," awesome, that's fantastic. It means you successfully deployed the application. If you see some message that says like, "Hey, something went wrong here," or some Heroku message, that's totally fine. Again, let's go through the steps to debug this. So if you saw any error message, that's totally fine. Flip back over to your terminal and run the command Heroku logs. Now when you run this command, Heroku will automatically give you some output that was generated by the deployment process. And so hopefully you will see some error message in here that might give you a little bit of insight into exactly what went wrong during the deployment. Do your best to try to figure out what's going wrong. Feel free to Google for some more error message or some follow-up or some help on troubleshooting. But of course, if you are having any issue or you see any error message inside of here, always feel free to post, and again, I'll do my best to help you out. Now I do have to say, if you see an error message and you make a post over on the discussion boards asking for help, please, please, please take a screenshot of the error message that you see and post it so I can see exactly what's going wrong. If you don't, if you just say, "Hey, it didn't work, something's wrong," I can't help you, right? You got to tell me what's going wrong. So please make sure you include a screenshot. Okay, so anyways, hey, on the plus side, if something went wrong, okay, that's fine, we'll figure it out. But if everything went according to plan, we have now deployed our brand spanking new Express application. You can now take the URL right here and you can share it with all your friends, and they will be able to see your application as it develops over time throughout this course. Now, do keep in mind that we're only going to deploy the application at some very specific intervals when everything is kind of working and ready to be deployed. So there might be some points in time at which it's not the best to like share with your friends because it might be broken, but we'll work through it over time. Okay, so that's pretty much it. At this point, we're going to end this video. We still have not gone through the process of doing subsequent deploys, but after we make our next change to our code base, we will do a second deployment and we'll talk about how we do another follow-up deploy. What I do want to tell you is that when you attempt to deploy our application again, you do not need to create another application, okay? I want to make sure that's really clear. So if you want to redeploy the application or follow up a second time, we'll go through the next batch of steps right here, which we'll cover in a future video. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let's continue in the next section and start adding some additional features to our backend server. So I'll see you in just a second.